question being debated around plenty of dinner tables tonight. Should children be banned from social media? Well, it's safe to say most parents are on board with the idea. It's a very difficult conversation with their kids. How do you take away something many of them already have? But the Prime Minister says it's time.
Government may not be able to stop every threat on social media, but we do have a responsibility to do everything that we can to help as many young Australians as we can. And we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
We're covering the conversation from all angles tonight, and joining me is parenting expert Dr. Justin Coulson, mum Kim Black and her son Axel, and high school students Gabby and Matilda, who join me in the studio. Really nice to see all of you. Kim, I'd like to start with you because I think you've lived through the worst of it. Your teenage sons were so addicted to social media, it was tearing your family apart. How bad did it get?
Yeah, it was pretty full on. I was raising the boys on my own. We lost their father a few years ago. So I had to work full time, and while working full time, I'm guilty of letting social media and gaming look after the children while I was at work in the afternoons. I knew where they were. I thought they were safe. It was a couple of hours every afternoon. But that eventually got pretty bad, to the point that I didn't know my boys anymore. They weren't talking to me. They were in the bedrooms constantly. They were up all hours of the nights and mornings, sleeping all day. When I did see them, it was very rude and arrogant conversations. And yeah, just lost all parenting control there for a while. I think the worst of it happened when it got to a night where I actually felt like I had to lock my bedroom door to be safe from my son because of just the arrogance and the attitude and the hate that was coming out from him. And he just wasn't my son.
Wow, that kind of abuse. And look, I sort of feel like you feel guilty there a little bit, Kim, when you talk about that. But I feel like it's something that resonates with a lot of parents, that they've allowed social media to play that role because life gets so busy. But Axel, can I ask you this, because it sounds pretty bad. How does it feel hearing your mum say those things?
It hurts to hear it because I do love my mum a lot, and yeah, I regret the way I treated her, and yeah, it just sucked.
Can you explain your addiction to Snapchat and TikTok?
I found that I was on it all hours of the night. I found it hard to get off my phone. When I was told to get off it, I was very aggressive and argumentative, and I played video games all the time. I didn't want to go to school. I wagged classes, sometimes fake being sick, and yeah.
Dr. Coulson, can I ask you, are you hearing similar stories from other parents?
Ali, this is not unusual. It's not common, but it's certainly not unusual even at this level. The American thinker and writer and academic Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Anxious Generation, and in that book he talks about how over the last couple of decades we've moved from what you would call a play-based childhood to a screen-based childhood. And what unfortunately we see across our young people is a decline in well-being because they really truly believe that they're getting their needs met by being on that screen. It's a hollow imitation, but it makes them feel so good in the moment. And so any parent who's trying to have some sort of boundaries and limits around this will come up against tremendous opposition because to the kids it just feels so good.
And in a lot of ways, I think it feels normal. So I'd love to bring in Gabby and Matilda here. You just heard Axel's story, but I want you to explain to me your relationship with social media and your phone.
Yeah, I think honestly I have a pretty good relationship with social media and my phone. Obviously it is a big part of my life, as it is a lot of other young people, but I think the main use that I use it for is connecting with my friends and family, and I think that it allows me to have that connection even if I'm not physically there with them.
So Gabby, do you think you have a healthy relationship with social media?
I think it's fairly healthy. I do use my phone quite a bit, but I do set limits on there as well because I know I need to try to regulate myself. I mean, every now and then I do find myself in that dreaded doom scroll and just scrolling and only just that, but I think it's mostly healthy, yeah. I'm mostly just talking to friends, having a good time.
What kind of arguments, or let's call them discussions, what kind of discussions do you have with your parents at home around social media and how much time you're spending on your phone?
But I don't really have many arguments with them about my screen time. It's more when I recognise that, oh, maybe I've spent too long on my phone when I should have been studying or something, they kind of bring it back to, okay, well then what can we do next time to help that?
Hang on. So you guys never ever get in trouble for being on your phones too often?
Well, maybe sometimes. I think there's often nights where my parents will say, oh, come on, it's 9, it's 10, get off your screens, rest, go to bed, that kind of thing. But I'd say on the whole, most of the time I can control it.
Do you have your phones in your room with you at night?
I do.
Same, I do as well, yeah.
We went through a phase where it was like, no phones in the bedroom, but I need it for my alarm. Well, that's the argument anyway.
Kim, I want to go back to you because you sent your boys to a 9-day boot camp. It's called Veteran Mentors that focuses on social media addiction. Now, I don't imagine that was cheap, but I think it goes to your desperation, right?
Correct. Yeah, it wasn't cheap. It wasn't easy to fund, but it was last resort. It was absolutely terrifying back then days, living with my teenage boys who could stand over me, who potentially were able to do whatever to me. I was lost. I hit social media to find the answer, and I was so thankful that Veteran Mentors came up and rang them and organised that, and best thing I'd ever done. I strongly believe that needs to be something that is government funded, that instead of going to school camp, we go to Veteran Mentors and we teach our Australian young children just the basic respect that should be had, and how to be a decent, good person, and how you can live without social media. Because once they went there, their phones were gone for 9 days.
So tell me then about the boys that you dropped off and the ones you picked up 9 days later.
So this going back a couple of years now, and I still get chills to think about the change. I'd never thought that could happen in 9 days. The boys I took were literally trying to find ways to escape on our way there. I remember Axel saying to me in the back seat, like, there's got to be a way I can get out of this place. And then we had they had all their phones and everything taken off them, but we could follow them on Facebook and see their progress through what they were doing. And then the day I picked them up was just amazing because they came marching out. They could actually march in uniform. They looked like soldiers. They stood like soldiers, and they were amazing. Their shoulders were back. They were young men. In 9 days, I got these people I was scared to live with to young, decent, loving, caring men.
Did you feel like you got your sons back?
More than, yeah, I do. It was so emotional. And even the boys they said that, your boys will come running at you and they will appreciate you for what they've been taught. And I just didn't think that would be I couldn't imagine them running to me with love after knowing what I sent them away like. And yeah, it was just incredible.
I'm so happy for all of you that you got through that. Hey, Justin, what Kim is talking about is a serious addiction. And I mean, these are effectively just kids. But if social media is making them anxious now, surely if we just take it away, their anxiety will actually go through the roof.
There's a lot of nuance here. Even as I listen to all of these stories, there's so much contrast. What we're really seeing clearly is that some people with appropriate limits and with appropriate personal regulation around their social media behaviour can derive tremendous benefits from being on social media. Conversely, with a lack of limits and with a lack of personal regulation, this is fundamentally destructive and is really, really harmful in the same way that things like gambling or alcohol or even putting a kid behind the wheel of a car. I mean, we have limits around this stuff for reasons. And while many people can manage all of those things perfectly well without any kind of intervention, it's quite clear that at a society-wide level, we need to have regulation, limits, guidelines, laws to help. When I listen to these stories, especially when I listen to Kim's story about her sons, I can't help but think that Zuckerberg and the CEOs, the titans of social media industry, are responsible for more human suffering among our young people today than pretty much at any point in human history. I just don't think that there's been any kind of technology that's created this level of suffering in our youth. It's absolutely abysmal. And if I can say this a little bit directly, our feckless politicians who have allowed this to happen at a global level have got a lot to answer for as well. The lack of legislation around this to make sure, like, where's the we're just going to introduce this thing and we'll find proof of harm later. I think that we need to be able to prove that there's a good here before we let people just go for it. And these stories, especially Kim's story, highlight what so many parents are telling me, and that is that social media as a general issue is absolutely at the heart of so much sleep deprivation, so much conflict, so much school avoidance, so much bullying, so much mental health challenge, and the list goes on and on and on.
And look, I could see Kim just nodding there, but I want to ask you, Axel, I mean, we're now talking about legislation. What that looks like exactly, we're not sure yet. How do you feel about social media being banned until, say, 16?
Well, look, if I was any younger than 16, I probably wouldn't like the idea, but I feel like it is appropriate because some of the things that you do see on social media is inappropriate for young minds and eyes to see. I was through social media I was introduced to drugs, and that was the main reason why Mum sent me to veteran mentors, and I completely regret that decision of my life, and I feel like it should be banned for people under 16.
Okay, so that's your view because that's based on your experience, Axel, but I'm sitting here with two fabulous girls who have a pretty healthy relationship with social media. So, Matilda, as someone who is 15, how do you feel about your social media potentially being taken away from you?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I would be very happy. I think the amount of connection that I have with my friends and the amount of positives that it actually does give me, in my personal experience, outweighs the negatives that I have experienced. But I understand that what I go through is not the same as what everyone else goes through. And I think we definitely do need to look at some form of minimising these negative effects of social media. However, I don't think a ban's going to be the right way to do it.
And I think you guys are the ones to talk to about this, because I also feel like when we ban something and it's forbidden, we just kind of want it more. Gabby, do you think young people will find a way around whatever we put in place?
Most definitely. Even right now, there are age limits on social media, but I know that several people find a way to get around that. And a ban, a straight up ban, I think a lot of people would find loopholes because they see it as something that they want to have then. So I think it's better to take a proactive approach, educating young people on the risks, making sure they understand why these precautions need to be taken, and I think that would be much more effective than a straight ban because people would ultimately just find their way around it.
Do you feel you're being punished then for those who can't cope with social media?
I would see it less as a punishment and more as, obviously, I understand it as a measure that's being taken to prevent these negative effects. However, I do think that many of my peers who are under 16 would see it as a punishment for something that they didn't cause ultimately.
Okay, Dr. Coulson, what do you say to that? Because the girls make a pretty good argument, don't they?
I say yes, and I mean, these are fabulous young women who are clearly making great decisions when it comes to their social media use, and I really do agree with them. What this is about is we've got to educate our young people and help them to make safe, healthy decisions. The problem is not enough education is happening. Too many parents are abrogating their responsibility around this, and too many kids are simply doing whatever they want. I mean, Ali, I spoke to a dad just the other day who said, my 7-year-old's on Snapchat. Do you think that's a problem? And I said, mate, yes, take your 7-year-old off Snapchat now. Now, I just want to emphasise this. We have bans on alcohol under 18, and people do find ways around it. We have bans on gambling for under 18s. People do find ways around it. But legislation draws a line in the sand and says this behaviour is not acceptable. We don't condone this. And obviously, no matter what laws we bring in, people find ways around them. But with a combination of what the girls are talking about, alongside really careful legislation, I think we can do tremendous good in helping our young people to be safer and helping dads like that one not have to worry about whether or not he's going to have a fight with his 7-year-old or his 12-year-old about being on TikTok or Snapchat.
Because look, I mean, I'm going to put my hand up here and go, I love this idea, I love this chat. I hope it happens because my kids are young at 5 and 7. They don't even know what social media is. But I would hate to be a parent of a 12, 13 or 14-year-old and have to do this. So just before we finish, Dr. Coulson, is there any advice for many bewildered parents trying to navigate this at the moment?
I'm one of them. I mean, I've got 6 daughters, as you know, Ali, and one of them is 14 right now. I'm raising my 5th 14-year-old girl at the moment. Oh, I'm so tired. And I digress. This is a tiring, ongoing challenge, and there will be pushback and there will be frustration. But frankly, I think we've done tremendous harm. I really do. When I survey the parents that I work with and speak to, the damage and the pain and the turmoil and the frustration and the conflict that people are going through every single day in their living rooms and their kitchens and their kids' bedrooms because of this technology is just so vast. It's worth the pain. It will be short-term pain. There'll need to be a transition period, but and in some ways we're too late for the current generation. But for the generation that's coming through, that is your kids, Ali, it will be one of the best things that we could ever have done. And generations from now, people will look back and say, should have done it sooner.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Coulson. Kim and Axel, loved that you shared your story. Thank you so much. It was brave and we love seeing where your family's at now. You're so wonderful. And girls, your parents must be so proud. Thank you so much for joining us on the desk. Thank you.